She actually believed it. I told her that, frankly, she just didn't fit the part. Some people simply lack any discipline. It was absolutely hilarious.
I wish I had been there to see it.
And then he had the nerve to ask for more.
I have been walking toward things my whole life. Toward the scholarship, toward the degree, toward the job listing that said, executive assistant, private sector, compensation competitive, discretion required, toward the interview, where a man with shoulders like a cathedral and eyes like a winter harbor looked at my resume for 3 seconds and said, "Can you manage a life that doesn't belong to you without making it yours?" And I said, "I've been managing things that don't belong to me since I was 12, Mr. Castorelli. That's what women like me do." He hired me before the sentence finished. 2 years, 730 days of walking toward his desk at 7:14 a.m. with coffee. Black, 1 sugar, served in the gray ceramic mug because he doesn't like the white ones, but has never told anyone this and doesn't know. I know. 730 days of managing his calendar, his correspondence, his contracts, his chef, his dry cleaning, his mother's birthday flowers, his underboss's wife's anniversary reservation, and the 17 invisible things that separate a functioning empire from a beautiful catastrophe. I have been walking toward Roman Castorelli for 2 years. This is the story of the night I walked away. It was a Tuesday. His mother, Valentina, came for dinner, a monthly tradition that Viola arranges, manages, and exits before the espresso. Because Mrs. Castorelli likes to believe her son's domestic life is self-sustaining, and I like to let her believe it, because the illusion is part of the system, and the system is mine. The chef called in sick at 4 p.m. I called Rossini's. I ordered the antipasti, the veal, the tiramisu. I set the table, the good china, the crystal, the Montalcino candlesticks that Mrs. Castorelli gave Roman for his 30th, and that he keeps in the sideboard, because he does not know they are there. Because I am the one who tracks objects, the way his accountant tracks cash. By location, by value, by occasion. I served, I cleared, I disappeared between courses, the way a good system disappears, present in the output, invisible in the process. And at 9:47 p.m., I was carrying the tiramisu through the service corridor when I heard his mother's voice through the open door. Roman. Valentina's voice was the voice of a woman who has been asking the same question for 6 years and has run out of patience. You are 36. You are alone. You work until midnight. You eat takeaway at your desk when your assistant isn't here to feed you. I am not asking you to fall in love. I am asking you to consider, even consider, that there might be someone. Mama, what about your assistant, the Serrano girl? My feet stopped. My hands did not move on the tray. The tiramisu sat, perfectly level. She's lovely, Roman. She runs your life better than you do. She remembers my birthday. She sends me lilies. Not roses. Lilies. Because she knows I prefer them. And you don't know that. Because you have never asked. She is smart. She is kind. She is, he laughed. Not the laugh he uses in meetings. Controlled. Strategic. The laugh that is a weapon. No. A real laugh. No. The surprised, uncomfortable, deflecting laugh of a man who has been cornered by a truth and is reaching for the first exit he can find. Viola? He said my name, the way you say a punchline. Mama, please? No one will ever want her. She's my assistant. That's all she is. No one will ever want her. That's all she is. I stood in the doorway. The tiramisu did not tremble. My hands did not shake. My eyes did not fill. I have a system for this. The system was built when I was 14, and a boy named Marcos at St. Agnes told me I was too big to be pretty. And my grandmother, Abuela Rosa, who ran a bakery in the Bronx for 31 years and made bread that people crossed boroughs for, She took my face, in her flour-dusted hands, and said, Mija, una mujer que se va de un hombre que no la ve, no se está yendo, está llegando, a sí misma. A woman who walks away from a man who doesn't see her is not leaving. She is arriving at herself. I set the tiramisu on the sideboard. I placed the serving spoon at the correct angle. I walked out through the service entrance, past the kitchen, past the staff parking, into my car. I drove home. I did not cry. I sat at my desk, in my studio apartment in Astoria, and I typed a resignation letter, single page, 12-point, Times New Roman, 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately. And the next morning, at 7:14 a.m., I placed it on his desk, beside the coffee, black, 1 sugar, gray ceramic mug, and I went back to my desk, and I began to work, because Viola Serrano does not do less than excellent, not even on the way out. Before I tell you what happened when he read it, I want you to answer. If a man you've silently built your world around for 2 years says no one will ever want her, about you, at a dinner table, to his mother, while you're standing in the doorway holding the dessert you arranged because his chef was sick, do you stay and let the sentence become part of the architecture, or do you walk away, steady, unhurried, the way a woman walks when she has decided that being excellent for someone who doesn't see excellence is a form of self-harm she is no longer willing to practice? Tell me now. I'll ask again, at the end. Let me tell you about the 2 years before the sentence. I was 26 when I applied. I had a degree in business administration from Hunter College, 4 years of executive support experience at a midtown law firm, and my grandmother's work ethic, which is not something you put on a resume, but is the thing that separates the people who do the job from the people who become the job. Roman Castorelli interviewed me in a room that smelled like leather and authority. He asked 3 questions. The first was about confidentiality. The second was about scheduling conflicts. The third was, if I give you an instruction that contradicts the instruction I gave yesterday, what do you do? I execute today's instruction, and I keep yesterday's on file, in case you change your mind again tomorrow. He looked at me for 4 seconds, not at the portfolio, not at the degree, at me. The way you look at a piece of infrastructure, you are deciding to build on, assessing load-bearing capacity, assessing whether the foundation will hold. Start Monday, he said. I started Monday, and I did not stop, for 730 days. I learned his coffee in the first week, the gray mug, the sugar, the timing. I learned his schedule in the first month, the meetings he takes, the meetings he delegates, the meetings he cancels at the last minute, because the real meeting is the one that happens in the car, on the way to the building. I learned his moods in the first quarter, the jaw when he's angry, the stillness when he's thinking, the silence when he's made a decision. He hasn't announced yet. I learned his mother's flower preference in month 4, lilies, not roses. I learned his underboss Marco's wife's restaurant preference in month 6, Cipriani, not Nobu. I learned that Roman Castorelli keeps a photograph of his father in the top left drawer of his desk, and that he opens the drawer every morning at 7:16, 2 minutes after the coffee, and looks at it for exactly 3 seconds and closes it. I have never mentioned this. I will never mention this. I learned every room he enters, and every room he avoids, and every surface he touches, and every surface he won't. I became the map of his life, and in 2 years, he did not learn a single thing about mine. Not my address, not my commute, not my grandmother, not the fact that I take the stairs, because the elevator makes me claustrophobic, and I have been taking stairs my entire life, and I am fast on them. Not the fact that I stay until 10 p.m. most nights, because the accounts don't reconcile themselves, and the contracts don't file themselves, and the restaurant reservations don't confirm themselves. I was the system. The system ran. And the man who depended on the system every hour of every day looked at his mother across a dinner table and said, "That's all she is." He found it at 7:16, 2 minutes after the coffee. The way he finds everything. On schedule. In position. Delivered by the system that has never once been late. I was at my desk outside his office. I heard the envelope open. I heard the paper unfold. I heard the silence that followed. 3 seconds. 4. 5. And then the silence changed texture. The way silence does, when a man who has never been surprised reads a document he did not expect. His door opened. Viola. He was standing in the doorway, the letter in his hand. His jaw in the configuration I had catalogued as processing unexpected data, not angry, not sad, recalculating. The suit was perfect. The coffee was untouched. The letter was held between 2 fingers, as if it might be contagious. What is this? My resignation. 2 weeks' notice, effective today. The transition binder is on the shared drive. I've documented all active accounts, pending contracts, vendor contacts, Mrs. Castorelli's preferences, and the household schedule through the end of the quarter. He looked at the letter. He looked at me. He looked at the letter again. You can't resign. I can. It's in my contract. Section 4, paragraph 2. 14 days written notice. I know what's in your contract. I wrote it. He stepped closer. Why? I looked at him the way I have looked at him for 2 years. Steady. Professional. The surface that gives nothing away. Personal reasons. You don't have personal reasons. You don't take personal days. You don't have personal calls during work hours. In 2 years, you have not once cited a personal reason for anything. Then consider this a first. He didn't sign the letter. He put it in his desk drawer. The same drawer with his father's photograph, and he said, "We'll discuss this later." We did not discuss it. Not that day. Not the next. Not on day 3, when the first crack appeared. The Castellano meeting was scheduled for Wednesday, and I had always sent the pre-brief on Monday evening. And the pre-brief was sent, on time, complete, because I do not do less than excellent, even on the way out. But Roman read it, and for the first time in 2 years, he noticed that the pre-brief existed, because for the first time in 2 years, he was paying attention to the infrastructure instead of the output. That is the thing about invisible labor. You don't see it until it's leaving. Day 4. The restaurant reservation for Marco's wife was at 7:30. It should have been at 8. I had always made it at 8, because Marco's wife finishes her Pilates at 7:15 and needs 45 minutes. Roman didn't know this. He made it at 7:30. Marco's wife was late. Marco was annoyed. Roman was confused, because the system had always worked, and the system was still technically in the room, but the system had stopped filling in the margins, and the margins, it turned out, were where all the competence lived. Day 6, the chef returned. He made dinner. The Montalcino candlesticks were not on the table, because I had always placed them, and no one else knew where they were. Roman ate dinner by overhead light. The food was the same. The room was different. He couldn't articulate why. Day 8, Valentina called. Not Roman. The office. She asked for me. "Viola, dear, Roman says you're leaving." "Yes, Mrs. Castorelli. 2 weeks' notice." "May I ask why?" I paused. 1 beat. "It's time." "I see." She was quiet for a moment. "He doesn't know what he said, does he?" My breath caught. She knew. She was at the dinner. She saw my face when I set the tiramisu on the sideboard. She's a mother. Mothers read doorways, the way I read schedules. For what's missing? It doesn't matter what he said, Mrs. Castorelli. It matters very much, Viola, and he will realize it. But it may take him longer than you have patience for. My patience ended on a Tuesday. "Have a lovely day, Mrs. Castorelli. The lilies for your birthday have been pre-ordered through next year. They're on account at Floriana's on Madison." I hung up, and for the first time in 14 days. My eyes stung, not because of the sentence, because of the lilies, because I had pre-ordered lilies for a woman whose son thinks no one will ever want me, and I had done it because it's the right thing to do. And doing the right thing for people who don't see you is the specific, exhausting, beautiful burden that women like me carry until we set it down. I was setting it down. Day 10. He watched me leave. I know this, because the elevator is at the end of the hallway, and the hallway has glass partitions, and glass reflects, and in the reflection, I saw him standing in his doorway, with the letter in his hand, watching me walk the 37 steps from my desk to the elevator, and his face was doing something I had not catalogued in 2 years of cataloguing his face. I did not look back. Looking back is negotiation. Walking away is grammar. Day 11. He brought me coffee. At 7:14 a.m., Roman Castorelli walked out of his office, carrying a grey ceramic mug, black, 2 sugars, because he doesn't know I take 2, and set it on my desk without a word. He went back into his office. He closed the door. I looked at the coffee. 2 sugars. Wrong, but right. The grey mug. The time. 7:14. He was learning the system by trying to run it backward. He was learning what I did by trying to do it, and he was failing. The sugar was wrong. The temperature was low. The mug had a small chip on the handle. That I would have retired 3 months ago, but the failure was not the point. The point was that a man who has never made coffee for another person was standing in a kitchenette at 7:10 a.m. trying to replicate the one constant in his morning, because the one constant had given notice, and the morning no longer made sense without her. I drank the coffee, both sugars, the chip, all of it. Day 12, 10:07 p.m., 2 days left. I was finalizing the transition binder, 243 pages of documented systems, annotated contacts, scheduling protocols, and a section I titled, Notes, Undocumentable. That contained everything I couldn't teach a replacement. The grey mug, the drawer at 7:16, the specific pause Roman takes before saying no. That means he wants to say yes. The way he straightens his cuffs when he's about to lie. The fact that he is allergic to lilacs, but does not know the name of the flower, and has asked me 3 times to get rid of the purple things in the lobby arrangement. 243 pages. The operating manual of a man who said no one would ever want me. Viola. He was in the doorway. The building was empty. The cleaning crew had come and gone. It was the 2 of us, and the glass partition, and the hum of the air conditioning that I had always adjusted to 68 degrees at 9 p.m., because he runs warm when he's working late, but has never told anyone this. Mr. Castorelli, it's 10 o'clock. I'm aware. You're still here. I have 2 days left. The transition binder isn't complete. You're writing a transition binder. 243 pages. Your next assistant will need it. You have 17 systems that exist only in my head. And I'm moving them to paper. He walked toward my desk, slowly. The walk of a man who is approaching something he has not rehearsed, which is disorienting for a man who rehearses everything. Meetings, negotiations, the specific angle of his jaw when he enters a room. Don't go. 2 words. The same 2 words a man said in script 105 from a hospital chair and script 106 from a private room. But these 2 words were different, because these 2 words came from the man who caused the leaving. I stopped typing. I placed my hands flat on the desk. I looked at him. Give me one reason. That isn't about the work. He didn't answer. Not immediately. The silence filled the room the way his presence fills a doorway. Completely, structurally, leaving no space for anything else. The work, he started. I said not the work. The accounts. Not the work, Mr. Castorelli. The Castellano contract has errors on page 4 that your next assistant will catch, because I documented the review protocol on page 107 of the transition binder, not the work. He ran out of filing cabinets. I watched it happen. The systematic opening and closing of every drawer he has. Every category. Every safe professional distance. The work, the accounts, the contracts, the schedule. Every drawer opened, found inadequate, closed, until there were no more drawers, until the only thing left was the unlabeled one, the one he'd been avoiding since a Tuesday evening. when he laughed at a dinner table and said the worst sentence of his life. "I know you heard me," he said. My breath stopped. Not caught. Stopped. The way a machine stops when the power is cut. "I know you were in the doorway. I know you heard what I said to my mother, and I know," his voice cracked. "Not a lot. A hairline fracture in reinforced concrete. I know that's why you're leaving. Yes, it wasn't true. It doesn't matter if it was true. It wasn't. It doesn't matter, Mr. Castorelli. Because true or not, you said it. And you said it because saying it was easier than saying the alternative. And I have spent 2 years being the easy answer, the assistant, the system, the thing that runs so well you don't have to think about it. I have been the path of least resistance in your life, and I am done being easy." I stood. I picked up my coat. I put my bag on my shoulder. I looked at him, not up, not across, at him, the whole of him, the jaw, and the shoulders, and the suit, and the drawer with the photograph, and the grey mug, and the man who sits in his office until midnight because he doesn't know how to go home, and I have never once told him to go home, because going home was not in my job description, but I stayed until he left, every single night, for 2 years, and he never asked why. My grandmother had a bakery in the Bronx. For 31 years, she made bread, and people crossed boroughs to buy it. Not because it was the cheapest or the fastest, because it was made by a woman who cared about every ingredient and every degree and every minute, and you could taste the caring. And when people asked her why she worked so hard on bread that most people eat without thinking, she said, "Because the bread knows, even if they don't." I paused. "I was your bread, Mr. Castorelli. For 2 years, I was the thing you consumed every morning, without thinking. And the bread knows, even when you don't." I walked to the elevator. 37 steps. I counted them the way I count everything. Precisely. Automatically. The system running. Even as it's shutting down, he did not follow me. He stood in the office, 3 feet from the desk, the resignation letter between the coffee mug and the transition binder, and he watched me walk away. And for the first time in 2 years, I did not check the reflection in the glass. I didn't need to. I knew what his face was doing. Day 13. I did not go to the office. I stayed in my apartment. I drank coffee. Mine. Made my way. 1 sugar. The blue mug that was my grandmother's. And that has a chip on the handle that I will never fix, because the chip is where her thumb went every morning at 5 a.m. Before the bakery opened, I watered the plant I brought home from the office. I reread my grandmother's recipe cards. Not to cook, just to see her handwriting, the slanted letters, the flour stains on the margins. I sat at my kitchen table, and I breathed, and the breathing was different. Because the air in my apartment does not contain the sentence, "No one will ever want her," and it does not contain the smell of cedar and authority, and the weight of being the most capable person in a room that doesn't know you're there. This is what arriving at yourself feels like. Quiet. Bare feet on cold tile. Coffee in a chipped mug. The knowledge that you walked away from something enormous, and you did not stumble. At 11:42 a.m., my buzzer rang. I did not expect him. I expected a courier. The office sometimes sends files. I pressed the intercom. "Ms. Serrano." His voice, through the speaker. Roman Castorelli's voice, in my apartment intercom in Astoria. A neighborhood he has never visited. An address he should not know. Except that of course he knows it, because he had access to my personnel file. The personnel file I typed myself. The system. Providing information about itself. "Mr. Castorelli, I have your coffee." I pressed the buzzer. I'm not sure why. Curiosity, maybe. Or the specific, masochistic clarity of a woman who has already walked away, and has nothing left to lose, and therefore nothing left to protect. He stood in my doorway the way he stands in every doorway. Too wide, too present. The architecture of the frame suddenly inadequate. Charcoal coat, no suit, a sweater underneath. I had never seen him in a sweater. It made him look like a person, instead of a structure. In his hand, a grey ceramic mug. Not a travel cup. The grey ceramic mug from the office, carried across 2 boroughs in a car, held in a hand that has never carried coffee for another person. 1 sugar. I looked it up. In the transition binder, page 238. You documented your own coffee preference. On the last page, I documented everything. You documented that you take 1 sugar, not 2. I've been making it wrong. You've been making it wrong for 3 days. I've been making everything wrong. For 2 years. The sentence I said at dinner, he said. He was looking at the mug. Not at me. The mug was easier. I understood. I have been looking at mugs instead of faces for 2 years. It was the worst thing I've ever said. And I said it because my mother asked me a question I was afraid to answer. She asked if I had thought about you. And I had. For 2 years, Viola. I had thought about you. Every morning at 7:14. Every evening at 10 p.m. when you were still at your desk. Every time you walked past my office and adjusted the thermostat because you knew I was warm. Every time you anticipated the thing I needed before I needed it. I thought about you. And the thinking terrified me because you are not something I can manage. You are not a contract or a schedule or a system. You are. He stopped. His jaw worked. The mug trembled once in his hand. And a man whose hands are steady enough to sign documents that rearrange industries trembled holding a coffee cup in a doorway in Astoria. You are the thing that's been running my life for 2 years. And I said no one will ever want her because the alternative, the truth, was I want her. And I don't know how to say it. And I am the kind of man who breaks things instead of building them. And you are the most carefully built thing I have ever encountered. And I was afraid to touch you, because I was afraid I would break you. You didn't break me. You underestimated me. Those are very different injuries. Which one heals? Both. One of them takes longer. He held the mug out. 1 sugar. The right temperature. I could tell by the steam. He had learned. Not from me. From page 238. From the document. From the system I built to survive my own leaving. I didn't sign the letter, he said. I noticed. I'm not going to sign it. That's not how resignation works, Mr. Castorelli. Roman. He said his own name the way he said mine, like a word he was learning to use for the first time. My name is Roman, and I am standing in your doorway in Astoria, with a coffee mug I carried across 2 boroughs, because I don't know how to say what I should have said at the dinner table. When my mother asked about you, what should you have said? I should have said, everyone will want her, and I want her first, and I have been too much of a coward to say it. The mug was between us. The threshold was between us. The sentence was between us. The old one, the wrong one, the one that started everything, and the new one, I want her first, was between us too, and the space between the 2 sentences was 2 years wide, and 37 steps long, and 1 doorway short. I'm not coming back to the office, I said. I know. You can't buy this, Roman. You can't schedule it. You can't put it in a contract and have me sign it beside the coffee clause. I know. My grandmother would tell you that the bread knows, even when you don't, and you didn't know, for 2 years. I know. He looked at the mug. He looked at me. But I'm learning. Page 238. I unfolded my arms. I took the mug. 1 sugar. The right temperature. The grey ceramic, carried across 2 boroughs by a man who has never carried anything for anyone. You can come in, but you're not sitting until you tell me what page the lilies are on. Page 112. Floriana's on Madison. Your note says she prefers the Stargazer variety. Order 3 weeks in advance. Always include a card in your handwriting, not typed. You read the whole binder. I read it twice. He stepped across the threshold. You documented everything, Viola. Except the one thing that mattered. What's that? You never wrote down what you needed. In 243 pages about my life, there is not a single line about yours. I looked at the coffee. I looked at the man. I looked at the doorway he had just crossed. The threshold between the world where I was his assistant and the world where I was the woman who walked away and came back. And the coming back was on her terms, not his. Then I guess you'll have to ask. I'm not going to tell you what he asked, not yet. That's for next time. But I'll tell you this. The resignation letter is still in his drawer, beside his father's photograph. He didn't sign it. He didn't shred it. He kept it. The way you keep the receipt for the most expensive lesson you've ever learned. And on my kitchen counter, beside my grandmother's blue mug, there is a gray ceramic mug with a chip on the handle. His mug. In my apartment. And every morning at 7:14, I drink from it. 1 sugar, the right temperature. And the bread knows. If you are the woman who has been invisible, the woman who builds systems and carries trays and orders the lilies, and stays until 10 and walks the 37 steps to the elevator alone every night. I made this for you. Hit subscribe. Share this with the woman who walked away from someone who didn't see her, and tell me, did you pick stay or walk away? Because my abuela Rosa would have picked walk away. And she would have opened the bakery the next morning at 5 a.m. And the bread would have been perfect. Because the bread always knows. New story every week. Hit the bell. And if you want to know what Roman asked when he sat down in my kitchen, you'll have to come back for that.